Because how can you develop a tourism in an area which before was considered as having nothing? We only had these high mountains, and people were afraid from these mountains. So intelligent people traveled to London and started to sing the merits of the Engadine with blue sky and sunshine in winter, whilst it was foggy there. And this was the beginning of the winter tourism in Switzerland, thanks to the UK market. That's probably the reason why our tourist industry has started to learn how to queue for subsidies. Today, Switzerland is certainly a famous tourist destination. And roughly 1/3 of our total export earnings are coming from tourism. 36 million tourist nights in 2010. I never understood how they counted the nights. Was it the hour of sleep or the night you really pay in the hotel? Don't ask me. During the Davos Forum, they count, and they know how to count. Talking about the role of tourism as a driver for growth and sustainable development, it's of course something close to the heart of almost every Swiss. As I mentioned, I'm originating from a tourist area, and today almost 100% of the income is driven by tourism, even the local cheese, even the local flowers, even the local teas, and even, of course, the guided tours to see wonderful elements at the level of 2,000 meters. You meet lobsters of a dimension of 3 millimeters, not to eat, but to observe, because this area was the ground of the sea thousands of years ago. Of course, tourism creates a positive effect on an economy and allows to supply all kinds of goods and services. And today, we start to be more sensitive to present a real good cheese instead of an industrial produced old-style Emmental produced according a recipe from the army, because it has to serve as a bullet, as a material to isolate, and as a cheese. There is also a potential negative side, and it was mentioned we have to take account of the environmental impacts as well as socio-economic dynamics. The only risk for your life today is when you meet hunters, you follow them when they watch the wildlife, and you start to sing. Then they kill you. Today, of course, the request lies on quality more than on quantity. And travelers get more and more spoiled. And I'm watching with a certain anxiety the tendency that if one starts to build a resort, then all the others build their resorts. And finally you have an overcapacity. Then they switch to something else, and the whole crowd switches. So one has, I think, especially when one develops a new tourist industry, try to identify first what is the real value added I can offer. Maybe there are places where You can invite all the drummers to come and spend their holidays if nobody is disturbed when they are drumming. If you do it in an area which is a quiet one, then people will not like you. Worldwide competition is very strong in tourism, and I think it is, nevertheless, one branch where economies can start to diversify. Time passes quickly. I have, as a last speaker, some last minutes. So let me assure you of the continued interest and support of the Swiss government to promote sustainable tourism, also together with our global partners. Our strategic orientation includes the strengthening of competitiveness and sustainability of touristic offers, the improvement of a conducive institutional framework, and improving market access and touristic information. In concrete terms, this translates into support of the creation of sustainable destination management organizations, the development of modern hospitality management, as well as introducing fair trade concepts into it. I wish you fruitful deliberations, and as we say when we are depressed, because the mountains sometimes are a little bit depressing, we say to each other not hello, we say allegra, which means cheer up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I know we're into the coffee break time, but I'm going to take a couple of questions, and I'm going to ask the first one to Ed Fuller, and I'm sure it's a question that's burning on everybody's mind. What would it take for you to invest in an LDC?
Well, the hotel companies generally are management companies which operate with investors to develop hotels. We are constantly looking, and we are involved in LDCs now looking for opportunities. Clearly, the advantage of having 18 different brands enables us to use various brands within the country. So we're not required to use one of our luxury brands like Ritz-Carlton or JW Marriott. In a country, we can also use Marriott Hotels, Renaissances, or Courtyards. At this point in time, the opportunity needs to be identified. For example, in Africa today, we have 5 full-time developers that are looking for opportunities. We're under construction today in Rwanda and Ghana and looking for further opportunities in those markets. And we're throughout the rest of the world continuing to see the opportunity, identify it, and put the appropriate property.
Good. Thank you. I know Ed has only, I think, 3 minutes to go, and we see that we've already lost our head of the World Tourism Organization, because, of course, we know about the competing. But can I take a question from the floor, which you have burning, and then I'll take another 2 questions for the other panel members, and then we'll have to wrap up, have our our coffee break, and try and start the second session on time. Is there a question in the audience? Can we have a microphone there, please?
Thank you for giving the floor. Let me join the voice with Dr. Talib Rifai. He mentioned that for the first time, the tourism has come into the mainstream global development discussions. And I would like to take the opportunity to thank ITC for leading these events. And we are very much aware what all these development partners and international agencies were trying to be involved, engaged in efforts to bring the capability enhancement of the LDCs. And we are so aware of the achievements, and in the meantime, we are not yet very much satisfied, so we are all here what we can do together. Having said that, there has been hope this morning that the graduation from the LDCs is not satisfactory, but the hope is there that those LDCs who have been very much relying on the tourism has shown the hope of rage as Samoa, Maldives. So with this context, if we can focus on the private sector's role, let's not escape trying to push them for the social corporate responsibility, but instead, we all know that private sectors are motivated by the only one word, the profitability. And for the profitability, we need the demand generations. So if we can have the consensus of these events today, in this very critical moment of the 4th United Nations Conference on LDCs, that the policy structures among the UN members who can enhance the demand, basically from the generating markets, or a consensus requesting to many of the members that waiving all forms of taxes and duties on travel to LDCs will certainly create demand and certainly create the investors' interest to invest in the LDCs countries. Thank you very much.
Did I understand you that you're calling for some kind of uniform taxation mechanism? Is that what you're proposing?
They do have heavy impositions of the duties and taxations in the travel, which is detrimental to travel in many of the destinations.
So you're talking about the policy framework. You're calling for the policy framework. Yes. Now, I know Ed has to leave. Is there one question that anyone has for him? Someone's done. And please, can you keep it concise and have the question?
Thank you very much. I'm Felix Mosha from Tanzania. Can Ed tell us what can Marriott do to maximize backward linkages in terms of supplies to the hotels, and where the capacity in that society does not exist to meet their qualitative and quantitative standards? What is it that they can do? How can they go out of their way to create that capacity? Thank you.
As a policy, and this is not just for the LDCs, this has been something we've been doing for the last 25 years. As we enter a new market, we spend the year before we open the hotel working in the market. That may include establishing standards with farmers on what we expect in the way of vegetables and how to grow them. It can be going to various vendors and establishing what our expectation is so that we can buy products locally. It is a commitment to education because our associates, and we call our employees associates, our associates need to come from the local community. And we work with various education centers to make sure the appropriate training is provided, and we will even provide teachers to help ensure the consistency and the continuity of the education. We have a program called Passports so that we can bring people from other industries, from agriculture, straight into the hospitality world. These programs we have to do in all countries when we're moving into a market that is not already established with a number of hotels. And we are always prepared to do that. Does that hit it for you? Does that answer the question? Okay.
Well, I want to thank Ed very much for joining us today. I know he only flew in to be with us today, and he's flying right back out. So I want you to join me in thanking him for being with us.
Thank you.
I can take a couple more questions. I mean, we have with us, still on the panel. We're going to take about 3 more questions before I wrap up, because I think it's important what we heard the minister saying, that the sustainability policy that they've put in place has actually already delivered results. Is there anyone that would have a question for the minister or for our ambassador here? Questions? Everybody was totally satisfied and understood completely. And there are no further questions? No? Well, it seems like everybody really wants a cup of coffee. So I'm going to summarize very quickly some of the main points that we heard this morning. The critical need for this public-private partnership in moving forward, and the fact that tourism actually is and has proven to be one of the important drivers in moving LDCs out of LDC status. And I think also important, it was not just that we have tourism, but how we have tourism. And that has been repeated over and over by various members or speakers this morning who have spoken about the need for sustainability standards. Because, you know, I've never understood why one would want to pollute the water or pollute the ground around your hotel, because clearly your visitors will never want to come back to a place that's uncomfortable. And maybe that's when the World Toilet Organization comes in. And I don't know, I know that I actually get emails from them. I've never actually read one, but maybe now that Pascal has mentioned it, I'll actually read the next email that I get from the World Toilet Organization. But I think important, the role of the state, as said by Dr. Supachai, and the question of domestic tourism, because I've always been interested in this particular subject as well, because in many countries, just moving from city to city, and we've seen this as a big issue in cross-border trading with our women vendors, because there are no facilities for them at the border posts. And because there are no facilities for them at the border posts, our women get into trouble as they try to cross borders and trade. So domestic tourism and facilitating domestic tourism is, I think, something which we have to understand that there probably is a good business case that's right there. So looking at domestic tourism and not only thinking about international tourism is, I think, an important thing for us to think about going forward. Speakers continue to say that we certainly have not captured the benefits, all of the benefits. Dr. Supachai spoke about the leakages, and Pascal Lamy spoke about the fact that we still only have 1% of the receipts going to LDCs in terms of global receipts. So there is still, although a growing market in LDCs, the need to capture more. I think, you know, this business of rulemaking and coherence goes back to the first question that we had about how can we incentivize and ensure that we have good market case for the development of tourism industry. My experience is that governments very seldom think about tourism seriously, and therefore, because it doesn't get this kind of serious thought, people take it for granted, and we don't always see the best policies following. In terms of UNWTO, certainly the challenge for SMEs and bringing the SMEs into a status where they can benefit greatly from the opportunities that tourism certainly presents, and the question of having the right kind of ethics in tourism so that we can, in fact, ensure that our women and children are not exploited in this industry. From Burundi, we heard about the opportunities that have been created by this national strategy for tourism and the need for having political stability, political and social stability as a precursor for any economic development, and certainly with respect to tourism. As a means of injecting good earnings into rural communities, which is very important. I know many countries are looking at that. And I applaud the government of Burundi for putting together a dialogue mechanism, which is so critical in getting a good understanding between public and private sector as to where the priorities should be. And finally, I was a bit inspired from the shoe shine boy, to the host, the welcoming host, in a matter of days, and understanding that human capacity is what we're talking about. Human capacity is what is going to make the tourism industry, and that indeed we can all achieve that if we work in partnership together. So I'd like to thank my speakers this morning. I certainly like to thank Minister and Ambassador for sticking it out with me on the podium this morning, so that finally when we close for coffee, I'm not alone. But I'd like you also to join me in thanking our speakers for setting the tone. The next plenary will actually now bring some practitioners, additional practitioners to the table. So we'll move from policy to action in this. And then, of course, after lunch, we will begin to go into the depth of how do you actually make it happen. So thank you very much and enjoy coffee. We're going to come back on time. So please, we'd like to start the next plenary on time.